Welcome to the BPM 360 podcast. I'm Russell.
And I'm Kasper. And together we will help you navigate the treacherous waters of the BPM adoption journey. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another short episode on the BPM 360 podcast. My name is Casper. I'm your host. Again, together with me is, as always, my co-host, Russell Gomersall. Russell, how are you, my friend?
Hello, Caspar. Yes, I'm fine. Great weather outside. Friday.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're going back to Friday recordings, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's just so much better for the mood.
Totally. And it's always good to wrap up. You're really in that wrap-up phase, when your mind is thinking about that.
Yeah. And I mean, you just got back from holiday. I know that. And you were in your holiday in roughly the same region that I was last week as well. That was a coincidence.
That's true. But I think if I'd wanted to pop up by car from Albania, Tirana up to Split, that would have been.
Yeah. But I can tell you, even the 26 kilometers from the airport to the conference location was like an hour drive because of the sheer traffic. It was incredibly. I was not used to that, but then again, Russell, we are being spoiled with the German and the Dutch highways that we have respectively.
True.
Cool.
So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, we got something great. As you know, I was at the Automation Summit 2025 last week in Split, Croatia. And we had the opportunity, Russell, and you were so gracefully joining from your holiday. We spoke to one of the two organizers, Darko Jovisic, and we're going to go through that interview in just a second.
Okay.
And we talked about the summit and what is there and what we found. And after that, we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
All right, cool. Well, then let's go to the interview. So I am together with Darko, and Darko Jovisic, ladies and gentlemen, is the guest that we have right now, and he's the organizer of the Automation Summit 2025, and also the one from last year. And we had the privilege of just getting a little bit of his time, knowing how busy this is during the conference, to get his ideas about how things are going. And of course, I'll update you a little bit on that as well. So Darko, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time in this shoot. Yeah, well, I had the privilege of actually speaking on this conference, so thank you for having me in this particular. Thank you. Russell, for you and for our listeners, the Automation Summit is a content conference. So it revolves around the topic of automation and its adjacent topics, I would say. It's not really a vendor or product driven conference, although you sometimes see within presentations that they make it a bit of a marketing story, but that is something that you can expect anyway from certain companies. But I have to say there was like 250, 300 people, Darko, right?
300, yeah.
Yeah, so you got to be happy about that, I guess.
Yeah. It's I'm really satisfied, It's especially because they're non-technical people and business users who actually are making use of the technology, and actually that's who we are working for,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely true. So the interesting. Let me give you a little bit of a recap. So. Yesterday, Russell, we started with a couple of presentations. I had the honor to kick it off with the first one, but I'm not going to talk about that because most people know what I talk about. But the one that came after me from Boris from Black Pine Executive Consultancy, that really resonated with me, and he also made that link between people, process, and applications, which is I still think the golden triangle. And yes, there is a lot of focus and emphasis on the automation part. It makes sense. It's the Automation Summit, but I think it's really good of most speakers that they try to build a bridge to either the real life or to how do we get this done. And we saw that this morning, I think, with the OTP Bank example as well. I actually don't recall having heard a presentation that I didn't like so far, which is quite impressive for a conference, to be very honest.
Thanks.
So let me ask you this before Russell no doubt has a question as well. how did you guys came up with this idea in the first place? I mean, I couldn't make it last year to your first summit, so I try to make up this year. But how did this idea come about?
Yeah, we had this idea a couple of years, but then we didn't want to organize something just for the sake of it. We really thought about this, and to sum it up, we just wanted to create a conference where I personally would like to attend. So kind of everything we do is governed by this. So, you know, as a typical IT guy, I went to a bunch of conferences, and then I tried to collect the things that annoyed me.
Yeah.
And just try to, you know, kind of avoid those situations in my own conference. So we have these kind of rules, or let's say kind of what's driving us. For example, you know, one of the things is I try to stay away from like panel or
I don't
kind of I don't particularly like that form.
I get that.
When you have like 6-7 people and you just shoot random questions, and then there goes my hour of my life. So I try to avoid that. I try to avoid, you know, like putting an emphasis on the company, and you know, we have 2,000 offices across the globe. Who cares? I mean, you care about the person there and
exactly
and what they have to say. So, you know, I try to advise all the speakers, like, don't put slides about you, you know.
Exactly.
If you know your stuff, you know, people are gonna love you and they're gonna talk to you after
exactly
the session,
exactly
So I try to organize. We try to organize something where we personally enjoy being.
I think you did a wonderful job so far, I have to say. And Russell, just this morning, so yesterday evening there was a party. I mean, conferences and parties always great, and they also organized a walking tour with a guide through the old city of Split, which really is just filled with history. That was absolutely one of the highlights, I would say. I'm not a big history buff, but I learned a lot about this little town that we have here, which is not that little, by the way. But that was really good. And then this morning, and I think that was really clever. So the party went out quite late last night, but this morning the first presentation was by a guy who works for the Scuderia Ferrari team, the Formula One team, with a very, very inspiring story on the 6 principles that Ferrari has for teamwork, and it had nothing to do with automation, but it was so inspiring. So I mean, that was wonderful. And Russell, are there things that you would like to know or learn about what's going on here in Split?
Well, maybe first of all, I mean, I also really like the idea of these events, people coming together. How many people were last year? Did you have a positive trend on the people visiting?
Last year we had something like 180 attendees. This year we are like 300, and then the venue size was more than doubled. So we have more breathing space, so to say, and the exhibitor area is much bigger. And then, as you said, Caspar, what we try to do is like really make people feel that they're, you know, that we are devoted to them. So in each small detail, we try to make sure that, you know, that we pay attention. So things like, you know, how the people get from the hotel to the party venue, you know, what they do in their spare time. Usually when you come to a conference, you're given a goodie bag and you know, off you go and figure out by yourself. So here we are trying to think about, you know, what people are doing and how we can make it more a pleasurable experience.
I absolutely love the towel in the hotel room. It's good. So
it's an overall experience, more than just going, getting your bag, listening to some conferences, a bit of networking around some mediocre buffet, and then going into the hotel. It's a real event that you're creating. I think that's really appreciated by the people. So how far is the reach of the people? You know, do you very quite local? I mean, Caspar, you know, it doesn't matter where the event will be, he will travel to Timbuktu. If you ask, hey, do you want to be a keynote speaker? He said, yeah. Don't care about the topic. Where is it? Don't care. I'll come. No, but say maybe other people. So is it a more local event, or is it?
I mean, the attendees are kind of, let's say, regional. So I would say like Central Europe. And the speakers are from all over the world. I mean, we have people from Singapore and then the entire Europe. So we try to bring like, you know, this expertise. But I don't know, potentially in the future, you know, I would like to see a more kind of broader audience, maybe, you know, expanding more international, but we'll see how it goes. But what we don't want to do is like scale the conference to, to 1,000 people, because then you lose this kind of, this feeling of intimacy, and people can, talk to each other, and you can meet personally like most of the attendees. And if you increase the number of audience, it just fades away, and
it does.
you lose all the benefits, all the advantages, and you lose the perception.
That's always the challenge, the balance of, if you're good, you're successful, people talk, it'll be more. So you get.
I think it's the same challenge as with the company. So when you're small, you're devoted to your customers, you take care, you provide excellent service. And then this extreme growth appears, and then you start to slip and become bad. So it's the same challenge.
I totally agree. And there's one little thing that I really like, Russell, is if you look at the level of the speakers. I'm just excluding myself here, but the level of the speakers is really high, because they actually they managed to simply make references to other speeches in their own speeches, and those are of course not scripted. I mean, I made a bit of a bold statement, and then I had at least two other speakers challenging me in their own presentations, which I love a good challenge. And I basically said, computers are just fast; they're not smart. So I stepped on some toes left and right.
Ooh, in the day and age of AI, I suppose that's quite a bold statement, definitely. But saying that, actually, especially Darko, what is your impression? Say, just a shift from last year to this year on the topics. What are the trends that you're seeing people are coming up with? I heard a lot about, say, getting things done and people, but more from the automation side. Are there kind of like shifts away from the typical automation based on robots, and where is AI coming more and more into game on the automation level? So what would you say is the trend there?
When I compare these 2 years, like let's say last year, I would say half of the talks included AI, in the title and in the talk. And mostly it was kind of centered around generative AI kind of scenarios. But there was a lot of talk about, I don't know, Kaizen, a BPM, and then a lot of RPA and so on. This year, I think I would say, except Caspar and maybe two, three other sessions, everybody else had agentic and AI as a part of the story. So it's overwhelming. So everybody's talking about it. Yeah, so we'll see how this develops, whether it's like a Me Too version or whether, so I think there's a tremendous race in this technology. We'll see who has the best, kind of strategy, and then who has the best approach to it. But what I really like, apart from the content, is actually, so we do have like, vendors, showing technology, but what the attendees really like is the customer cases. So we try to kind of mix out and have like real feedback from companies, what they tried and how it worked and where they failed and what they learned. So this is very appreciated by attendees, and I think it's a good combination. And then also we kind of try to do small demo sessions. So Kasper did a small demo. So it's not only about fancy slides and cool animations and videos. It's actually take a 10 minutes and just do a really cool live demo. No scripted videos or pre-recorded demos, like
put your money where your mouth is.
Yes, like put it just connect to the internet and show us.
That was more nerve-wracking than my presentation.
I also did a demo.
That's good though, and I think that's the challenge nowadays. Is so I think a lot of people are seeing the fancy slides, and a lot of people are talking about the soft sides of things. But I still do like a good demo, and if people really dare to say, first of all, talk about where they failed and how they then managed to get back on track again on the real life examples. I think that's one thing where if you get a conference to get people there that are not just showing shiny slides and everything works, but they do go to the dark side of automation, which we all know can be very dark. That's one thing. And the second one is, and if then the people are bold enough to say, come up with demos and showcases that don't have to be super clean cut, but that just show certain principles and how they work to give, I think, also people confidence to be bold about going in direction of automation. Because what I see a bit is with the, say, some of the people are used to using computers, but when it comes down to technology, also with AI, it's like a black box. It has to work. And if it doesn't work, well, what do? In the old days, you would start to configure and try to repair something like with a car. But nowadays, it's like, oh, it's binary. It works or it doesn't work. But giving the people the feeling that with the new AI technologies and these tools, you can dig deep. You can open up the hood, you can go in, and you can show that it's not just a black box that somewhere in Silicon Valley has been created, but something that you can configure and make work. And I think that's important for conferences to transport this to the end users, that there is, there's something you can work on. It is not just all black magic that you just pay per license, but you can get down to make things work. So I think if you get a conference to show that, that's awesome.
I think that really worked, and we need to make it short. This is a short, Russell, so we need to let Darko get back, because the program is about to begin. We don't want to keep it from its organizer. But Russell, thank you very much for joining in from your vacation address. Darko, thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to do a short podcast with us. And I'm going to enjoy the rest of the program before I head home.
And for your audience, come next year on the Automation Summit.
Yeah,
for sure. We'll mention that in a second. Come to this. We'll make sure that there's a waiting list. Okay. You need to have a waiting list. That makes you exclude a waiting list. Oh, and by the way, Russell, there was nothing mediocre about the buffet. The food was excellent.
Oh, no. I was saying, I'm sure.
I know what you talked about.
I'm 100% sure that the buffet was top notch. And
Absolutely
the gin tonics were also top notch last night.
I have no idea. I don't drink alcohol, but yeah, I bet. Russell, thank you very much. Darko,
have fun on your vacation.
Thank you. All right, Russell, that was an interesting interview with Darko. Let me just give you my perspective before I start asking yours. So I was there at that conference, giving my perspective on how I think automation should have its place within the larger process intelligence universe. And what I noticed is that a lot of people and a lot of presentations, they still basically sidetrack or sidestep the topic of you need to optimize first before you automate. And that was my general feeling. And my question to you is on that topic. I mean, you speak to a lot of companies in your role as an advisor. How often do you run into that, let's say, trap where automation becomes a goal instead of just a means to an end?
I think it's becoming less to a certain extent. We've talked often about how also the analysis side from a process mining perspective and the process management perspective were sometimes like a bit, like tribes doing their own thing, and only partially really joining their thoughts and their initiatives. And I think similarly, we also have this automation. And when you're talking about automation in the context of process intelligence, I think you are talking about the typical cases of RPA, where you go down onto a very granular level of automating processes, or low code, where you go look at the process and you automate it. But ultimately, I think the understanding, specifically now that you're getting more generic AI cases, kind of like being woven into these processes, on these initiatives, and also the whole approach around low code it's always about what are we actually doing here? We are optimizing a process. So with RPA, I don't think it was so much the case. It really was, I have a technical issue, and I really need to say automate something that could be done much better, but say the mainframe here and the legacy system there needs to be somehow streamlined. And it was always, I think, a lot of the time seen as an intermediate solution, knowing that the actual long-term solution would be completely different. And now the approach is, I think there is a shift. So I think if you went to the automation summit last year and this year, I think the whole context of this, looking at this automation market and what we're talking about, that's getting a substantial shift. And I think that's where it still is the case, but I think it's getting less and lesser. Yeah, there's much more awareness and much more openness to join these initiatives, and that, which is ultimately a good thing.
And then, I mean, I still sometimes need to mention that I am still on record in one of the conferences for process mining back already in 2019, I think it was, where I said that RPA is a band-aid. It's a temporary fix, but you should find a structural solution. Now, there, of course, are use cases, very specific use cases, where RPA might be actually the most efficient way of dealing with it, but it certainly is not, at least not in my view, it's not a generally applicable rule of thumb. If I hear and look at the sentiment being on that conference floor in Split for a couple of days, is that compared to the year before when they had the first automation summit, only a couple of the presentations mentioned AI as an automation engine, so to speak. And now it was virtually everyone. I mean, I didn't have it in my title, but I certainly had it on a slide for sure. I mean, we typically say there is no AI without PI, because you need contextual information. But it certainly is a shift, I would say, in the direction of where automation is looking at. So I think orchestration and AI-powered automation is getting much more and more traction in today's day and age. Would you agree with that, or do you see it differently?
Yes, and what I think is interesting as well, in a lot of the bigger initiatives where before you were thinking about global standardization and like this whole template discussion, here also during the scoping and design phase, people are thinking about more about, okay, how can I deploy AI and automation to really get some innovative solutions in place. That's where I think that's also very interesting to see that the let's say the applicability and these boundaries between something highly technical and say, oh, leave that for later when the IT guys get down to the details. It's becoming much more in a business context. People are thinking about optimizing and automation belong together. You know what I mean? Because before you had the business, you would talk to business, yes, we need to talk about our processes and how we organize that better. But now you have a lot of business people and you talk optimization, you're also talking automation. And that's where I think AI is giving this confidence that, hey, if I can do a couple of prompts and get so much automated improvement in my whatever results, I want to have this in my standard processes. Yeah. And so that's where I think there's, even if the solution afterwards isn't highly, generic AI agent, but it's just a normal automation, the thoughts about this in such an early phase of a big initiative, that's definitely thanks to the accessibility to automation solutions based on AI that are driving the market.
That's an interesting one. In the keynote that I had the privilege of delivering at that summit, I had this one slide where I had one question that I repeated 4 times. And the question was really simple. Do we need to automate this? And then in each one of the sentences, I emphasized another word. So the first sentence was, do we need to automate this, or can we outsource the problem? The second one was, do we need to automate this? So in other words, is it urgent? Is it important enough to think about automation? The third one was, do we need to automate this? Or are there other solutions? Maybe structural process redesign, so you don't have to automate that. And then the last thing is do we need to automate this? Are we actually automating the root cause, or are we just automating a symptom? And I got some good feedback from the crowd afterwards on especially that little slide where people start to think about, we're very quickly sometimes going into the direction of automation. First and foremost, it's hip and happening. It's much more sexy than doing other things, but it's not always the best approach, at least not automatically.
Yeah.
So that was that, and I had some interesting conversations about that in the breaks and even during the party afterwards. So I mean, from that perspective, I had a good time there, man.
Yeah.
By the way, it is it's a very old, interesting city. At least the old town of Split is very nice. There's a very big castle. Just as a little bit of an history lesson, and in the basement of that, in the cellar of that of that castle, so the ground floor, so to speak, they actually shot 1 or 2 episodes for Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Now, I never watched that series, but a lot of people that were in the guided walking tour, they actually apparently did, because there were a lot of like oh and ahs in the audience.
Okay.
So my takeaway from that is, if you do a presentation, just say that you're in the same positions where they shot Game of Thrones, and then people will go oh and ah much more automatically than they do around automation.
Yeah, I also visited Dubrovnik, and I think they did some shootings there as well. And there was some castle in France, and it's just that everywhere you see a higher fluctuation of I don't know, geeky people and Asians. You know, something's being shot there, or some Instagram influencers posted the pictures of this. Yeah.
No, absolutely true. Cool. All right, hey, let's wrap this episode up.
Okay.
I think it was an interesting interview that we had with Darko. So Darko, if you're listening to this, thank you once again for having us, having me, but also having us as a podcast to interview you in the midst of the actual summit. And we'll catch you guys the next episode. Cheers.
Take care.